Kelsey Childress from ABC 13 in Lynchburg reports that under the new rules mandate by the president and the Department of Labor, employers that refuse to comply with the new mandates could face up to $13,000 in fines. And federal workers and employees have 75 days to get fully vaccinated. And so now let everybody get scared and freak out. The new vaccine mandates affect approximately 140,000 Virginians, to include healthcare workers, businesses, and educators who remain unvaccinated. Some employers in Lynchburg, like Carol Caswell and Alana West-Smith, both women, believe that getting more people vaccinated is essential to community safety and have praised the new requirement. Note that they are also not doctors or scientists or anything else that might qualify them to provide an opinion. And we shall get into this miscomprehension later. But let's dispatch with very quickly some concerns expressed by Ms. Westmouth, who told ABC 13 in reference to being vaccinated, honestly, walking around, some people are dishonest about if they haven't or not, and unmasking. It's just a very serious situation. Really? Please. We have been engaged in litigation since June 2nd, 2020 on the non-medical grade facial coverings, which are not technically masks. Hello. And even until within the last year, even the CDC had made a distinction between these countermeasures that are designed differently and serve entirely different functions. Of course, you should know that if you're a scientist. We are now on petition for certiorari before the United States Supreme Court. And it is legally significant that even though State Attorney General Mark Herring descended swiftly to react to other facial covering challenges in the courts, he chose to evade a summons from the United States Marshal after we filed in federal court in Richmond, which is both a felony offense that is punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison, as well as a predicate offense under the federal racketeering statute. Very interesting. Strange defense move for an attorney to make. Moreover, Mark Herring refused to enter an appearance when the case was brought on appeal to the Fourth Circuit. Why wouldn't he make an argument? Which does not place him or the governor in a favorable light in the matter that has now reached the United States Supreme Court. And neither has offered any response regarding our argument that no study before the facial coverings mandate nor since has yet established that one-ply cotton or any non-medical grade facial covering, even a bandana, as Ralph says, can prevent a person from being infected with any disease caused by microbial particles. That is known from battle experience by protesters in Hong Kong, that not even N95s can provide sustained protection against tear gas and extended exposure. And some people are talking about COVID-19 being aerosol, and so that's going to be in your air for at least 2 hours. And that pathology of COVID-19 has established that it cannot be transmitted through contact with contaminated surfaces. CDC admitted this back in April, or outdoors, which is consistent with tracer contact studies that have validated COVID-19 as a less than 5% infectious pathogen, which is 4 times too low in statistical significance to validate the presence of a disease that is being transmitted from person to person, and 12 times too low to set off a super spreader event by natural means. Dr. Fauci should know this. Science community has known this at least since 1982. A Business Insider story by Yelena Dejanova reports that Dr. Nicole Linder from Michigan said she watched a patient's COVID-19 symptoms worsen for weeks. Oh my God, you're a doctor, you're supposed to do that. According to her story, Linder, chief hospitalist at OSF St. Francis Hospital Medical Group in Escanaba, Michigan, urged the public to get vaccinated against coronavirus. And to make her point clearly, she cited a very special patient of hers named Kathy, who had refused the vaccine adamantly before contracting the virus. After being admitted to the hospital, Kathy, I don't know if that's her real name or her made-up name or the name that she always uses when she has illustrations that aren't real, called up several family and friends to convince them to get vaccinated. And at least 6 people got vaccinated after speaking with Kathy. Why not 600? I don't know. She did have 600 friends. But for Kathy, death is imminent. Oh my God. We're all eventually going to die. And she was released on hospice care to spend time with her family as her symptoms continued to worsen. Sob, sob, cry, cry, give me the world's smallest violin. Let's get into this Business Insider story, and I want you to put on your Mr. Spock ears and be logical like a science officer aboard the Federation starship so Mr. Sulu can be proud of you, which means that we can dispatch with short, shrill effect this emotional baggage about a dying patient, the deathbed conversion, and her imminent death prognosis. People die every freaking day. And let's just consider the logic of infectious disease, where, as reported by Bruce Aylward, the Assistant Director General for the WHO, and veteran epidemiologist, who had led the joint mission to China at the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak and had examined almost 56,000 laboratory-confirmed cases. Have you examined 56,000 laboratory-confirmed cases? No, you have not. And had completed the most comprehensive report, some 40 pages, which most Americans have not read for one reason or another, before the Virginia lockdown, who told Julia Bellus at Vox Media on March 2nd, 2020, that getting the virus is a function of whether someone's got it, how long they're exposed, and how much virus they are shedding. That is a basic understanding of infectious disease, regardless of how it goes in your head. Cootie shots for life and everything I own. And so the dispositive question for this emotional story is whether Kathy, if that's her real name or if she's a real person, under stress of a terminal condition, was thinking logically or just scared out of her freaking mind of a potentially lethal disease. Like any deathbed conversion, as we know from waterboarding and all these other wonderful things we do in counterintelligence, even Shakespeare's character, Hamlet, the vacillating prince of Denmark, said that death doth make cowards of us all. And like any girl, I love a man who's not afraid to show his feelings. And as a former counterintelligence officer, for me, it is reasonable to expect that a person like Kathy would crack under pressure rather easily. But if Kathy was Wonder Woman or a true logical Vulcan, she would have to ask whether being administered the vaccine that she sold from her deathbed to her friends and family, that's just unconscionable, would plausibly have altered her outcome after being infected. And even though on August 23rd, the Pfizer vaccine product was approved for private label marketing by the FDA 5 months ahead of schedule, the 6-month study upon which the FDA had relied was what? Not an effectiveness study. Oh, but I thought I had an effective vaccine. No, you have an efficacious vaccine. And usually that effectiveness standard is required for a new drug application, or even an accelerated new drug application. And if you know intellectual property law, you know all of these things. But only an efficacy study, and an efficacy study that had established that the serological titers for the correlates of protection for a person who was only partially vaccinated with 1 dose would experience a 0.3-fold increase in antibodies and immune response over a person who had been unvaccinated, and a 3.3-fold increase if they had received the 2nd dose to be fully vaccinated. Is that enough to prevent you from being infected? Don't believe the hype. On August 5th, at a White House briefing, even Dr. Fauci conceded that vaccines would have to provide evidence that sufficient correlates of protection were being triggered to make them better able to prevent infection from COVID-19. He announced this like he had just discovered this. We've known this for like a century, but NPR had a different take on it. But in simple terms, we're trying to figure out whether or not the vaccines can be effective and not just trigger some level of immune response. Hey, I got more antibodies than you, but are they enough? This is what efficacy is. as distinguished from effectiveness. Terms you need to know in a pandemic if you're going to be running around selling vaccines from your deathbed. However, since the infectious dose or amount of pathogen is required to produce a state of disease or infection remains unknown for COVID-19, even after over a year, the level of protection provided will remain at most a guessing game. And it is not a good sign that even the 6-month efficacy study that had formed the basis for the full approval by the FDA ahead of schedule for the Pfizer vaccine has remained non-peer-reviewed since its publication on July 28th. I'm sure that we all read that. Ain't I got no damn feelings? No, I don't. In another business story by David Koenig at the Associated Press, since United States Airlines with 67,000 U.S.-based employees face a September 27th deadline for getting vaccinated, it was announced that vaccines would be required for employees. More than half its employees who weren't vaccinated last month have gotten shots. So they got scared about losing their jobs and went out and got something that they may not even need and something that actually may hurt them. We don't know. I don't know. United Airlines says more than half of its employees who weren't vaccinated last month have gotten their shot since the company announced that vaccines would be required. In another business story by David Lynch at the Washington Post, he reported that the president's decision to require medium and large companies to subject their employees to mandate vaccinations or weekly coronavirus testing represents a sharp expansion for the federal government's workplace powers, according to political scientists and legal experts. And he spoke with Bob Harvey, the leader of one of Houston's largest business groups, who said this will come as a relief to the business community to have an order that requires all of them to move together. So basically, they can say that the government made us do it. Okay. Sharice Jones at USA Today reported that the new requirement applies to employers with at least 100 workers, potentially affecting more than 80 million people. Another 20 million who work with or for the federal government will have to be vaccinated. Jones reports for USA Today that vaccine mandates are legal as long as employees can seek accommodations for legitimate medical or religious reasons, most experts say. Kevin Shalvey at Business Insider has a similar story on a wave of facial covering litigations in which he spoke with several attorneys. Didn't mention my facial covering litigation at the Supreme Court. And he reports that Brendan Beery, a law professor at Western Michigan University, the Harvard of Michigan, claimed that those challenging mask mandates would likely argue that the federal government lacks the power to impose them. Really? He added that there are two areas where the federal government is explicitly authorized to regulate under the Constitution: federal property and interstate commerce. Okay. Well, number one, that vaccine, goodness gracious, under, what is it, Goldberg v. Kelly? That's an entitlement. So you have a right to due process. It's a property-like right. We've known this since the 1970s. However, thanks for all of those wonderful welfare litigations, you good liberals. However, like the emotional story about the dying COVID-19 patient, Kathy, that touches the heartstrings, the Resistance is Futile story on vaccines and facial coverings is simply not only biased, but also actually wrong. Damn wrong. Whether you rely upon Jacobson v. Massachusetts, which has been the most recited case during the public health crisis, because the facts are very, very simple for visual learners, involving a smallpox vaccine in Cambridge in 1905, or whether you use the normal regulatory deference case of Chevron USA v. NRDC, which Blake Moran taught us at Washington and Lee, after he just got out the Army doing administrative law. This due process decided in 1984. It is clear that while the government is granted great deference, big thing that you know when you're in law school or in the practice of law, deference, it is not granted plenary power. Translation, it can't do anything it damn wants. And common sense is not the basis for the deference granted to any regulatory agency, but rather the expertise of that agency. You know, the common sense reason why we let you do what you want to do as an agency is because you know what you're doing, not because it's common sense. And while If the issue is debatable, the government will prevail, generally. If it can be established that the agency is just clearly wrong, the government will lose. That's why we have a government of laws, not of decrees. We don't have kings and all that kind of thing. Good God. But I guess everything changes when suddenly you're scared like a little girl and peeing in your pants because of a microbe. The government is saying that non-medical grade facial coverings are effective at preventing microbial infection. And here, a few things of legal significance are imperative to understand based upon the timing. In August 2020, the Supreme Court decided DHS be Board of Regents for University of California. And while the facts involved a DACA case for these people that think of law in simple, crazy terms, which is why you get a lawyer when you go to court, the rule of law is clear. An agency can only issue a regulation based upon what is known at the time. And any attorney knows that courts traditionally eschew what? Speculation. And the UNESCO precautionary principle that Ralph seems to want to push everybody to have has actually been expressly rejected by American courts. And he should have noticed that even inside the Wikipedia article that his research, quote unquote, had cited onto the Department of Energy. So all of this evolving science nonsense may conform to your notions of common sense and may make sense in your head, but that is not the way it works in the law inside a court. And that is why the nation's only physician serving as a state governor runs from me when I take him into a court, but probably won't run from you. You better get a damn good attorney. On non-medical grade facial coverings, regardless of how much common sense it makes in your head, no study to date has established that one-ply cotton is impervious to microbial penetration. And if you believe that it is, please seek mental help. The largest SARS-CoV-2 particle is 6 times smaller than the smallest particle of active ingredient in tear gas. Ever been tear gassed? I have, and I actually enjoy it. And if your bandana does not work after being tear gassed in a protest, it will fare no better and probably far much worse in an exposure to a biological agent. Kind of makes common sense, doesn't it? The NIOSH, it's also science. The NIOSH established this scientific fact a decade ago, and yes, they actually wasted money for that study because they figured that somebody is not going to understand that and scream evolving science until the cows come home. Hey, well, how are the cows? But how about the chickens? But no science study to date has altered the empirical facts. He said he grew up on a farm in a tweet to President Trump last year. Abortion cases going back even to just 2016 in Whole Woman's Healthcare v. Helderstedt established that the government cannot use general statements about the public health to impose an undue burden on citizens' rights. Even if Blake Marat can run into a court and scream, due process, due process. You can't just scream public health, public health. Abortion cases, we looked at this inside the abortion decision, Texas. Remember that? We all in front of the court. We all remembered that. Okay, you just remembered that it was about women's rights. No. There was a law that was discussed inside the court. I don't know why they discuss laws inside courts. It's just the oddest thing. Abortion cases going back to Planned Parenthood of southeastern Pennsylvania, Vacate in 1991 established that a measure by the government must be reasonably calculated to prevent a harm. And a facial covering that simply does not work to prevent any harm cannot be mandated. Why? Because it doesn't make any goddamn sense. So you can thank your Planned Parenthood folks and the abortion lobby for that law. And if that law has changed, we need to rethink some of these abortion decisions. Now, on to the vaccine. Full approval at the FDA requires an effectiveness study and not simply efficacy. And not only was the Pfizer vaccine approved with an efficacy study, but also an efficacy study that has yet to be peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed, that's a little science thing that you have to do. Everybody just sign off on it and say it's wonderful and nice and science, which is a clear abuse of discretion in abrogation of a controlling law. And anyone who denies that in court can just deal with a charge of fraud upon the court. And I love to bring those. Further, for those still feeling emotional about the patient Kathy, if that's her real name, and her deathbed conversion, and who believe that the countermeasures provide you, find God for God's sake, who believe that the countermeasures provide you an extra level of protection if you are concerned about dying in Virginia. COVID-19 has a 1.7 case fatality rate compared to MERS that had a 39% case fatality rate. Wow. Your chances of stay off the roller coaster. Don't go to the slopes. No skiing for you. No. No Aspen this year. Your chances of dying from COVID-19 are only slightly greater than dying in an automobile accident. And unless you are giving up all automobile travel, you are not being logical at all. 8% of Virginians have been infected with COVID-19. Only 4.3% are hospitalized. That's your case hospitalization rate, which is actually 10 percentage points lower than it was in March and April of 2020, when it was about the same as your chances of being injured in a parachute accident. And if you're not going out parachuting, okay, well, you're a little risk averse. When there were no stories about ICUs turning patients away because of a lack of capacity. Imagine that. We have a lower hospitalization rate, but suddenly the hospitals, the ICUs are full. I don't know. And that means that almost 96% of persons who are infected, oh no, I'm infected, I took the test. Why'd you say? With COVID-19 will never go to a hospital at all, compared with 80% in China in December 2019 to March 2020, at the beginning of the public health crisis, who experienced nothing worse than mild pneumonia, if anything at all. Remember that whole asymptomatic infection crap? So if you are freaked out, panicked, and scared about COVID-19, you are simply not being logical. A God in heaven simply does not like you, and you need to turn in your little Spock ears and Blue Federation shirt. Kirk out. And Sulu, what part of engage requires clarification? Live long and prosper, Star Voyagers. This briefing is unclassified. As you were, my name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington Public School Board. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our schools. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.